What if the reason you're not profitable has nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with who's sitting in your spiritual assembly? Be honest. How many more indicators are you going to download before you admit the real issue isn't the chart? How many more losses are you going to blame on volatility before you confront the fact that you break your own rules under pressure? You say you want consistency, but you still trade emotionally. You say you trust your system, but you override it the moment price moves against you. You say you believe in God, but you haven't invited him into the one area that exposes your character the most. So let me ask you something, and it might feel uncomfortable. If your trading results are a reflection of your internal alignment, what are they currently saying about you? Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover might completely change the way you approach the market. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. In the book of Deuteronomy, as the people of Israel stood on the edge of the promised land, a solemn command was spoken regarding who could and could not enter the assembly of the Lord. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, the law declared that certain individuals were barred from full participation within the gathered community. A man who had been physically emasculated was excluded. Those born out of what the text calls an illegitimate union were forbidden entry, not only for themselves, but extending to the 10th generation. The standard wasn't just momentarily, it stretched across time, embedding restriction into lineage itself. But the decree went further. The descendants of Ammon and Moab were signaled out with particular severity. Because their ancestors had refused Israel bread and water during the wilderness journey and had hired Balaam to pronounce a curse, their exclusion was declared permanent, even to the 10th generation. The text repeats, underscoring its weight. The memory of hostility during Israel's vulnerable migration became grounds for enduring separation. The assembly was not merely a gathering, it was a protected covenant space, guarded by history. Yet alongside exclusion, distinctions were carefully drawn. The children of Esau, that is, the Edomites, were not to be despised, for they were kin. Nor were the Egyptians to be hated, for Israel had once lived as foreigners in their land. Though the first generation remained outside the assembly, the third generation born to them could enter. The command balanced restriction with measured inclusion, weaving together memory, ancestry, and national identity in precise detail. The passage closes with the tone of a community being shaped before crossing into its future. These were not casual suggestions, but covenantal boundaries set before conquest began. As Israel prepared to take possession of the land promised to their fathers, the terms of belonging were clearly articulated. The assembly of the Lord was defined by lineage, history, and divine decree, establishing who would stand within the gathered people and who would remain at its edges. The assembly in Deuteronomy is a powerful metaphor for the trading community. Think about it this way. Not everyone gets to stand in the inner circle of consistent profitability. The market has an assembly too. It's not announced in scripture, but it is enforced in results. You can open a brokerage account in 5 minutes. You can download indicators in seconds, but entry into the true assembly, disciplined, emotionally regulated, consistently profitable traders, is not automatic. It is earned. In Deuteronomy, lineage, history, and past actions determine access. Well, in trading, your patterns determine access. Your impulsivity, revenge trading, refusal to honor a stop loss, those behaviors quietly exclude you. Not because the market hates you, but because the market only gathers those who respect structure. The assembly of profitable traders is protected by rules just as surely as ancient Israel was. Some traders are like the nations that refused bread in the wilderness. They withheld patience from themselves. They starved their strategy of time. They cursed their own process with doubt. And then they wonder why they feel spiritually and financially outside the circle. Others are given delayed access. Like the third generation allowed to enter, they must mature. They must outgrow their early recklessness. They must survive their first blown account, their first over-leveraged mistake, their first ego-driven loss. The market does not permanently ban them. It simply requires transformation. The trading assembly is not about perfection. It is about covenant. A covenant with your rules, a covenant with your stop loss, a covenant with your risk management plan. Break that covenant consistently and you exile yourself. Keep it faithfully and you stand among those who compound quietly while others churn. But here's the truth. The market is open to everyone, but it only gathers those who respect its orders. So the real question isn't, is the market fair? The real question is, are you living in a way that qualifies you to stand in its assembly? Let's take this deeper. In Deuteronomy, there were people who could not enter the assembly. They weren't random. They were represented histories, alliances, and patterns that conflicted with the covenant identity of Israel. The assembly was protected space, and anything that threatened that identity remained outside. Now think about our community, the unique variables we carry into the market. Many of us were not raised with brokerage accounts. We were raised around survival, around stretching groceries, around watching money leave faster than it arrived. Scarcity wasn't a theory. It was at the dinner table. So when you enter the stock market, your nervous system doesn't interpret it as opportunity. It interprets it as a threat. Every pullback feels like loss of security. Every red candle feels like confirmation of ancestral fear. That scarcity mindset cannot sit in the assembly of disciplined compounding. Then there's unfamiliarity. The stock market was never explained in culturally accessible language. No one in my hood was discussing Fibonacci retracements or risk management over cookouts. It felt foreign, technical, reserved. So when you begin learning, you are not just studying charts. You are crossing psychological borders. And that crossing triggers discomforts in those who have never seen it done safely. Unfamiliarity breeds suspicion. And suspicion, when unexamined, breeds sabotage. Now let's address the crab in a bucket mentality. When one crab starts climbing, the others instinctively pull it back down. Not because they're evil, because movement exposes stagnation. When you begin speaking about building wealth differently, about discipline instead of hustle, compounding instead of overtime, it unsettles people who have normalized struggle. Your growth forces a mirror into the room, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. Then there is the very real distrust of Eurocentric financial systems. And let's be honest, that distrust didn't appear out of nowhere. Historically, abusive structures, redlining, discriminatory lending, economic exclusion, these are not myths. They're documented realities. So when someone says trust the market, your spirit may whisper, trust the system that once excluded me. That hesitation is not ignorance. It is historical memory. But here's the distinction. Acknowledging historical harm does not require permanent financial exile. You can study the system without worshiping it. You can learn the rules without surrendering your identity. You can extract opportunity without forgetting history. That's wisdom, not betrayal. The voices that say this isn't for us often come from pain. But pain, if left unchallenged, becomes a prison. And you cannot build generational wealth from inside inherited psychological cages. There are voices that cannot enter your trading assembly, not because you hate them, not because you're arrogant, but because your growth cannot survive constant contamination. Some people in your life function like the Ammonites or the Moabites of your journey. When you were in your wilderness, learning charts, studying indicators, trying to understand risk, they did not bring bread and water. They brought sarcasm. They hired doubt to curse your vision. Trading is just like gambling. You're going to lose everything. Stick to something safe. And the more you try to explain your strategy, the more they reduced it to foolishness. Those voices cannot sit in the assembly of your discipline. There are also those who have been wounded financially and now project their fear onto you. They blew up in accounts once, or they watched someone fail. They were taught that wealth is suspicious. So every time you talk about compounding, they tighten up. They call it unrealistic. They label it risky. But what they are really offering you is their unresolved trauma. You cannot let someone else's fear govern your covenant. Then there are the subtle discouragers, the one who smile but minimize. That's cute. How much have you really made? Let me know when it's serious. They don't openly oppose you. They just drip skepticism. And that drip is dangerous because over time it erodes conviction. In Deuteronomy, exclusion wasn't about superiority. It was about protection of identity. In trading, you must protect your psychological environment the same way. If someone consistently mocks your discipline, if someone pressures you to abandon your stop loss, if someone ridicules your structured plan, they cannot enter your assembly. Not because they're evil, but because you're nervous. But because your nervous system is still stabilizing. Early stage traders are fragile. One sarcastic comment can trigger revenge trading. One dismissive conversation can cause you to override your rules just to prove something. And when you start trading to prove instead of to execute, you exile yourself from profitability. Here's the hard truth. Some people cannot enter your financial future because they are emotionally committed to your past. And you have to be mature enough to recognize that without bitterness. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't recruit everyone into your vision. You simply guard the assembly. The market already tests your confidence. You do not need additional critics sitting in the war room while you're trying to execute a plan. The assembly of profitable traders is small for a reason. It is built on emotional regulation, covenant loyalty to rules, and quiet conviction. And if you are serious about growth, you must ask yourself, who currently has access to my trading assembly? Whose voice echoes in my mind when I hesitate? And are they qualified to be there? Because just like in Deuteronomy, access shapes destiny. Let me speak to you as someone who understands pressure. Trading is not just charts and candles. It's exposure. It's vulnerability. It's confronting your fear of loss, your hunger for validation, your desire to win. And if you've been carrying that alone, I want you to know something. You were never meant to build under pressure without spiritual covering. You are not weak for needing God in your trading journey. You are wise. The market tests your discipline daily. It tests your ego, it tests your patience, and sometimes it tests your identity. When a trade goes against you, it can feel personal. When you win, it can feel intoxicating. Inviting God into your process doesn't mean you stop using strategy. It means your strategy is anchored in peace instead of panic. And peace is an edge. Imagine beginning your trading day not with anxiety, but with alignment. Not asking how much can I make, how can I steward what I've been given? The shift alone changes everything. Because when you see your capital as a gift entrusted to you, you stop gambling with it emotionally. You start protecting it intentionally. Some of you have been grinding alone, learning alone, losing alone, celebrating alone. And underneath it all, there's a quiet fatigue. You want success, yes, but you also want security. You want to know that your growth isn't just luck, that it's covered, ordered, and guided. God is not intimidated by your ambition. He is not offended by your desire to prosper, but he cares deeply about who you become in the process. When you invite him into your trading journey, you're not asking for magic trades. You're asking for wisdom, for courage when fear tightens your chest, for discernment when opportunity looks good but isn't aligned. That kind of guidance compounds far beyond a single winning position. And you don't have to figure that out alone. If something in you is steering even slightly, I want you to consider joining our trading Bible study. It's a space where faith and finance are not enemies, where discipline meets devotion, where we talk about charts, yes, but we also talk about character, where you can grow your account and your spirit at the same time. You've invited indicators into your strategy. You've invited mentors into your education. Maybe it's time to invite God into your execution. Come join us. Let's build skill, structure, and spiritual strength together. You've got this. Peace and blessings.